Surrender yourself to a state of absolute, crushing stillness, a silence so heavy it feels like a physical weight pressing against your chest, a sepulchral vacuum that drains the very breath from your lungs. Close your eyes and allow your consciousness to be slowly, inexorably smothered by a monolithic, ashen entity that transcends time. This is not a ghost, but a creature of compacted soot, ancient grime, and unforgiving granite. It breathes with the rhythmic, bone-deep thud of unseen hammers endlessly falling in the lightless, sulphurous depths of a subterranean forge, a heartbeat of iron and stone that has pulsed for 1,000 years. This is no mere city as conceptualized by the sanitized, colorful maps of modern cartographers or the clinical, bloodless descriptions of dispassionate geographers. No, this is a gargantuan, ancient predator, an apex scavenger of history composed of cold, sweating stone and jagged, centuries-old mortar. It is a leviathan of the Rhine, a monstrous beast that has unhinged its massive, moss-covered jaws and, in an act of profound and silent consumption, swallowed 40,000 souls into its dense, suffocating gullet. Here, the architecture does not house life, it digests it. In this sunless place, the vital fluid that pulses through the urban veins is decidedly not the warm blood of human compassion or the milk of human kindness, nor is it the pristine ethereal faith toward the eternal that priests, with practiced hollow piety, proclaim from their gilded, candlelit pulpits. While they speak of salvation and the light of Christ, the shadows of the vaulted arches dance behind them like mocking demons, fueled by the very wax paid for by the copper coins of the starving poor. What truly drives Cologne in the year of our Lord 1400 is a sophisticated, frigid, and entirely indifferent clockwork mechanism. It stands as a massive social engine, an ossified machine built of iron, blood-soaked tradition, and immutable law. It was designed with a singular, cruel purpose: to grind individual freedom into a fine, unrecognizable powder, and then, with the merciless efficiency of a hydraulic press, it compresses that dust back into a block of ironclad, stagnant stability, immutable and unyielding to the desperate, muffled cries of the weak. It is a brutal, profoundly mundane form of alchemy, the perverse transmutation of humanity's primal fear of death and its fervent religious devotion into a ceaseless, shimmering stream of revenue for the ruling elite. If you were unfortunate enough to be born under the wrong crooked eve, or within the pervasive stench of a particular tannery, your destiny was stamped in indelible red ink the moment you drew your first breath of smog. Your life would inevitably unfold as a long, pitch-black tunnel with no light at the end, a suffocating labyrinth of endless, unwashed toil, with absolutely no hope of escape, save for the anonymous pits of the potter's field. Official histories, as ever, prefer to weave grand, golden tapestries for the eyes of posterity, narratives of illustrious dynasties, chivalric romances, and bloody conquests that famously shifted the borders of empires. Yet, they habitually, and perhaps quite intentionally, ignore the raw, naked truth festering, almost putrid, at the very bottom of the social hierarchy. They choose to look past the children who perish in the freezing mud, and the men who break their spines for the sake of a single copper coin. They forget that the glory of the past was lubricated by the sweat of the forgotten. Cologne, at that time the most prosperous and resplendent metropolis in all of Northern Europe, was built upon a legal foundation that, if viewed through a modern lens, would be unhesitatingly condemned as the most violent and sophisticated form of monopolistic market manipulation ever conceived. It was a golden cage where the gold was reserved exclusively for the keepers, and the bars were forged from decree and debt. This is no whimsical fairy tale of knights in shining armor riding out to save the world from dragons. This is a grim, unflinching indictment of sheer survival in a society being slowly throttled by its own calloused hands. When you squint to look closely at the fissures in the city's scarred stone walls, you will experience a chilling shock of recognition. You will glimpse the faint silhouette of the very world we inhabit today, merely hidden behind a different, perhaps more insidious, digital mask. The chains have not disappeared, they have simply become invisible. Let the cacophonous, neon reality of the 21st century dissolve around you like a thin wisp of smoke caught in a fierce gale, When you open your eyes, the biting, crystalline chill of an October morning in 1400 will sear your lungs as though you've inhaled a mouthful of needles. The transition is violent, a sensory assault that strips away the comforts and the arrogance of the modern mind. The air itself is thick, a visceral, heavy shroud that clings to everything it touches. It carries the pervasive stench of ancient, damp stone that has never seen the sun, the acrid, stinging bite of greenwood smoke rising from 10,000 hearths, and the characteristic heaviness of mud and human filth accumulated over generations of relentless, unwashed toil. It is the smell of a civilization that has outgrown its own skin and is now rotting within it. Cologne does not awaken to the gentle, poetic caress of dawn. In the labyrinthine alleys so impossibly narrow that two strangers passing each other must literally hold their breath and turn sideways to avoid a collision of chests, sunlight is a distant luxury. It is a prize reserved only for those dwelling on the highest floors of the towering, timber-framed gables. Down on the perpetually damp ground, a grey darkness reigns even at high noon, and the ancient cobbles are slick with an oily, nameless grime that seems to bubble up from the very bowels of the earth. The entire city is jolted awake by the terrifying, rhythmic roar of bronze. Dozens of cathedral and church belfries erupt in a violent, deafening unison, their metallic clangor tearing through the thick, damp mist that perpetually rises from the churning, grey Rhine. It is not a call to prayer. It is a command to return to the yoke. It is the sound of the machine starting its daily grind. With 40,000 inhabitants crammed into a space far too small for their burgeoning numbers, Cologne is as claustrophobic as a sealed tomb. It is a colossal human anthill, stirring uneasily in the gloom, bracing itself for another relentless day of exhausting struggle against the crushing gravity of poverty. You find yourself near the Neumarkt. Look up and truly feel the oppressive weight of the architecture surrounding you. These structures know nothing of mercy or human-centric aesthetics. The timber-framed houses soar upward, their upper stories jutting out further than the ones below, leaning over the street like rows of jagged, rotting teeth waiting to snap shut. They obliterate the precious blue sky, leaving only a thin, grey thread of light to trace its path overhead, a mocking reminder of a heaven that feels light years away. In this perpetual dim twilight, amidst the pervasive reek of open sewers and the damp chill emanating from the river-soaked earth, the brutal, unending war for survival truly begins. Deep within a shadowed lane, inside a weaver's shop, a woman stoops to light a fire. Her hands are coarse, permanently cracked, and deeply stained by years of working with indigo dyes and caustic lye, a chemical blue that no scrubbing can remove, the mark of her caste. The crackle of dry wood does not merely signal the promise of a meager breakfast. It is the rhythmic, almost mechanical heartbeat of a relentless family enterprise that cannot afford the luxury of sleep. In Cologne, women are not decorative ornaments confined merely to the hearth. She is the strategic mind, the silent architect behind the looms that thunder like distant drums in the background, shaping the very rhythm of their existence. She must meticulously calculate the cost of every bundle of wool imported from Flanders, manage complex ledgers of debt through sheer mental fortitude, and stand ever ready to fiercely confront the most cunning of clients or demanding guild inspectors when her husband is away at the markets. But do not mistake this tireless industry for freedom. On the contrary, it is a suffocating weight, cunningly disguised as inescapable duty. In a system utterly devoid of any social safety net, one single miscalculation, one shipment of precious goods rotted by a leaking roof, or a single sudden illness striking the breadwinner is enough to cast an entire family into the gutter. It transforms them into shunned, hollow-eyed beggars in the span of a single, unforgiving night. Nearby, two small children, their faces masked in a permanent layer of soot and dried mud, strain under the weight of heavy wooden water buckets from a public well. Here, the very concept of childhood is an alien, perhaps even meaningless, term, a luxurious privilege reserved for a class of people they will never, ever meet. Father, my back hurts so much. I can't feel my shoulders anymore. The younger child whimpers, his narrow frame trembling visibly under the heavy wooden yoke that digs into his tender flesh, leaving raw red welts that will eventually turn into permanent scars. "Stop your whining!" the father replies in a raspy, utterly emotionless voice. His eyes, devoid of warmth or paternal softness, never leave the half-processed hide he is scraping with a rusted blade. The smell of rot and tannins hangs heavy on his breath, a scent that has become part of his soul. If your hands aren't strong enough to hold a bucket, then your mouth won't have any need for bread tonight. Work or starve. The world doesn't owe you your breath, boy. If your father is a shoemaker, your destiny is irrevocably tied to the pungent, often nauseating scent of tanned leather and calluses, earned before your hands are even large enough to properly hold a full loaf of bread. This unforgiving system never pauses to ask who you wish to become. It only cares what you can contribute to the survival of the clan and the preservation of the guild's monopoly. Choice. That was a utopian concept yet to be invented in the dark, damp alleys of the 15th century. As you emerge from the oppressive shadows of the side streets, you are immediately hit by the frenetic, chaotic energy of the hue-marked, the Great Haymarket. But this is no mere livestock feed station. It is a miniature, global exchange, a neural center where power is defined not by noble lineage, but by the sheer weight of currency and the absolute, ruthless control of logistical pathways. The soundscape here is no longer the monotone tolling of bells, but a rich, dissonant, multilingual symphony of clashing classes and fervent ambitions. The majestic, nasal Latin of scholars debating theology clashes sharply with the elegant, melodic French of Bordeaux wine merchants, the guttural Low German of local porters straining under heavy loads, and the rapid-fire Italian of traders clutching precious spices like cinnamon and pepper, as if they were shards of the true cross itself. But observe the people crossing the square with a discerning eye. A man draped in a luxurious, fur-trimmed robe glides past with a look of haughty disdain fixed upon his face. He never deigns to touch the raw goods himself. He only touches the parchment that abstractly represents their immense value. He is the master of symbols in a world of brutal substance. The law here is explicit and utterly ruthless. Sumptuary laws dictate that only those of his exalted rank are permitted to wear that specific fabric, that deep Tyrian color, or that particular ermine trim. The system does not merely control your purse strings, it meticulously controls your very appearance, your inherent dignity, and the precise way the world perceives your worth. Even if a master craftsman becomes exceptionally wealthy through years of relentless labor, he is strictly forbidden from crossing the line in his attire, lest he appear nobler than his assigned station. Social stratification is woven into every fiber and every stitch of your clothes, an invisible but entirely unbreakable cage. At a quiet corner of the bustling market, an elderly widow trembles visibly as she displays small, carefully arranged bundles of dried herbs. She is a testament to the strange, cold openness of Cologne's law which, uniquely for the era, allowed widows to continue their husbands' businesses independently. But it is a cruel, deeply lonely independence. Looking at her hands, cracked and bleeding from the biting October cold, as she painstakingly counts meager copper coins, you understand the stark reality. No sales means certain death by starvation in a week. The system permits you to exist, but it feels absolutely no moral obligation to sustain you if you falter, grow old, or simply lose your utility to its relentless gears. Descending the slope toward the muddy, churning banks of the Rhine, the scenery shifts violently. The grandeur of the market gives way to a choking haze of dust, the thick, salty stench of desperate sweat, and the raw, desperate shouting of tireless laborers. Here, you come face to face with the darkest secret behind Cologne's fabled wealth, the infamous staple right, Stapelrecht. Any ship passing through this strategic stretch of the river, even those on an urgent voyage to the distant northern lands, is forcibly halted not merely by iron chains stretched across the water, but by cold, merciless legal decrees. Stop the vessel. Unload every crate and barrel immediately. The bailiff's guttural roar easily drowns out the rhythmic slapping of waves against the hull, a sound as constant as despair. But I've already paid my tolls upstream. I have an urgent order for the Hanseatic ports. The ice will close the sea in weeks. The captain pleads, his face pale with anxiety as he gazes helplessly at his dwindling profits. His voice is tinged with the desperation of a man who sees his livelihood being pirated by a city council in broad daylight. Here, the law of Cologne is the only law that exists. The bailiff sneers, his eyes cold and unyielding as he taps his ledger with a smug, deliberate rhythm. 3 days, in the warehouse. You sell to our citizens first, at our prices, and only then may you pass. Move, or we seize the entire lot as contraband and throw you in the dreaded Frankenturm to rot. This is not free trade. This is organized extortion, sanctioned and enforced by the state itself. It transformed Cologne into a massive financial vacuum, relentlessly sucking wealth from every artery of European commerce into its insatiable maw. The dock workers, their muscles bulging and straining from dawn until dusk as they haul the world's riches, receive only enough coins for a meager bowl of thin, grey broth and a few gulps of cheap, sour beer. They are the screws and bolts that keep this perpetual machine turning, yet they will never taste the sweetness of the immense fortune they carry on their aching backs. Looming behind all this chaos, grit, and naked greed is the Cologne Cathedral, a gargantuan, eternally unfinished skeleton of stone, reaching its skeletal fingers toward the heavens as if demanding an impossible answer from a silent god. The massive wooden crane atop the South Tower has stood idle for over a century, a permanent, rotting scar against the city skyline, a stark symbol of an ambition that dramatically outstripped its means. Yet the cathedral is far more than a mere sanctuary for souls seeking comfort or salvation. It is, perhaps more accurately, a supreme financial engine, a colossal tool specifically designed for capital mobilization. Inside its hallowed walls lies the magnificent golden shrine of the Three Kings. Thousands of pilgrims flock here every year from across the continent, bringing with them a burning, desperate faith in salvation. And, perhaps more importantly, they bring silver, money for offerings, money for spiritual relics, money for the so-called indulgences to buy God's mercy and shorten their time in purgatory. In Cologne in 1400, faith was perfectly incarnated into a steady and remarkably lucrative revenue stream. The pilgrims themselves do not feel exploited. They willingly surrender their life savings to this intricate system because they genuinely believe it is a fair price for a ticket to paradise. Ask yourself honestly, how many systems in our civilized world today operate on the exact same fundamental formula of harvesting human belief, inherent hope, and the deep-seated fear of the unknown? However, Cologne was not merely a site of one-way oppression, a monolithic system without challenge. There were always underground currents of resistance, though they often ended in the bitterest of historical ironies. Only 4 years prior, in 1396, the city had experienced what many believed to be a true political earthquake. The guild's powerful alliances of skilled craftsmen and ambitious small merchants had courageously risen up against the entrenched ruling patricians. They did not use swords to completely overturn the old order. Instead, they wielded tight organization and decisive economic pressure to force the elite to sign the Verbundbrief, a primitive, groundbreaking form of constitution. For the first time in history, those who actually produced the city's wealth had a formal, recognized voice in its government. It sounded like the dawn of a promising democratic revolution, a beacon of change in a dark age. But the reality, as it often is, was far more bitter and complex. The old wealthy families, masters of adaptation, transformed like chameleons. They used their vast reserves of gold to subtly bribe the rising guild leaders and utilized their deep-seated, insidious influence to warp the new regulations stealthily in their favor. The system did not collapse. It merely shed its old, overt skin for a more sophisticated, harder to identify, and ultimately harder to topple exterior. As night falls, the massive oak city gates slam shut with the dry, metallic groan of iron chains, echoing through the darkening streets like the closing of a tomb. Cologne becomes a solitary fortress, completely severed from the wild, untamed world outside. In the dim, smoke-filled taverns, lit by the acrid smell of sputtering oil lamps, the rigid lines between classes blur ever so slightly under the warming influence of cheap beer and even cheaper wine. Here, men sing boisterous songs of freedom and argue fiercely about unjust new taxes and the manipulated price of grain. their frustrations boiling over into the night air. We have the verbund brief, we have the law, we have the seal of the city. So why is the price of barley still rising? Why does my child still sleep on the cold earth while the merchants sleep on down? A burly blacksmith slams his wooden mug onto the table with a resounding thud, shouting through a thick haze of smoke and desperation, because the men who signed that parchment for us are now sitting at the same banquet tables as the ones we wanted to overthrow. A quiet, bitter voice responds from the deepest, darkest corner of the pub, heavy with weary wisdom. The shadow of the cathedral is too long, friend. It has eclipsed both justice and conscience. In this city, you don't change the machine changes you. But when the comforting intoxication fades and the first cold, unforgiving light of dawn appears, everyone trudges back to their predetermined place in the relentless gears of the city. Under the long, cold shadows of the cathedral, the homeless lie curled up, shivering uncontrollably in the bone-chilling mist. The monastic hospitals are perpetually overcrowded with bodies broken by back-breaking labor and the recurring, merciless plague. The glittering, ostentatious wealth of Cologne, so proudly displayed, is built directly upon their nameless, forgotten graves. Cologne in 1400 is not merely a dusty chapter of history, neatly closed in the distant past. It stands as a stark, uncompromising mirror, reflecting our own complex, often unsettling reality. Are we truly as progressive and liberated as we so eagerly boast? Or have we simply replaced the grey stone walls of the past with complex, invisible algorithms that govern our lives with even greater precision? Have we replaced the physical staple right with digital platforms that monopolize the very flow of information, shaping our perceptions and taxing our attention? Have we replaced the eternally idle cathedral crane with the hollow, shining icons of modern consumption and the pervasive, anxiety-inducing fear of missing out? Cologne in 1400 teaches us a painful, timeless lesson. The greatest danger is not merely living within an unjust system, but rather living in it for so long that we begin to unconsciously accept injustice as a natural law, as the inevitable and only way the world can, or should, operate. If this story has made you feel a slight unease, a small shiver of reflection regarding the invisible threads controlling your own life, then this journey through time has profoundly fulfilled its purpose. Sometimes, we look back at the past not simply to see how the ancients lived, but to realize with a chilling shock who we truly are, and precisely where we stand in the relentless, turning gears of humanity.